All right, awesome. Um, Thank you so much for everyone for coming out during your lunch break. I'm really happy to be participating in this community. I'm not part of ATX DAO yet formally, but I think I'll be joining up when the next offering opens up. But I think this is a really great community full of really awesome people. It's a really good place for all the blockchain minds in Austin to come together and share knowledge. My goal for this presentation is to kind of prompt discussion and thought. I don't want to take up the whole time just talking. I'd like to kind of reserve the second half of this time for the group to open things up to the rest of all the smart people here and kind of go back and forth and talk about, what your thoughts are on decentralized data storage. Some of this knowledge is going to be redundant for some of you, but I hope this presentation helps kind of fill in the gaps and gives you kind of a framework to think about decentralized storage going forward. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a full stack developer. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm focused on the Web3 space. I've been around the space for about 5 years. Previously, I had founded a Web3 services company. We worked with enterprises mainly to do builds with them, a lot of POCs. I worked as head of product for an NFT platform after that. I created a decentralized key management software. And I'm currently working on my next project that's focused on this decentralized storage space. So I've done a little bit of everything in that space over the past couple of years, essentially. So let's start this conversation around just the first principles. I think the most important question that you can ask when you're looking at any vertical, especially when you're looking at any vertical and trying to apply a Web3 methodology to it, is to ask why and keep asking the why questions. Oftentimes in the Web3 space, we're quick to want to decentralize everything without really considering things from first principles perspective. If you think about it, when it comes to data, there's already an extensive data cloud infrastructure that's been built out. You could argue that it's $1 trillion industry. So why do we have to feel this need to come in and disrupt that? And we'll get into more of those details in just a moment. Another point I want to make here is that when you think of data, I want you to think of information. Data feels kind of vague, and everything you interact with on the internet is essentially information, right? So that's kind of what I want to go through your head right now. Everything is information, and information is data. And in general, I think the data layer is probably the thickest and juiciest part of the web stack. Because basically every application is currently facilitated through a centralized data source. And what we want to achieve is decentralized autonomous web applications at the end of the day. Is that right? So let's talk about the why. So if everything is data, I think that we can all agree that data is a core requirement for human coordination in the modern age, because we're all coordinating through the internet. This presentation is taking place through the internet. I think we all met through the internet, probably most of us, right? So it's fair to say that data is a core requirement for human coordination at this point. And they say, data is the new oil, right? And the person who controls that data is going to have an incredible amount of power and leverage. And almost all data is currently centralized in the hands of very few entities. And this has created essentially a walled garden where you have these highly curated platforms that own all the data, and only allow you to use that data within that context. And by the way, you don't actually even own that data, right? I think this really kind of killed the original vision of the internet, which was supposed to be this open space of communication, data, and creation for all human beings. And what it ended up being was like a handful of applications that basically make up a big chunk of internet traffic. And you know, one of the issues with the current dynamic is that the individual is essentially the product, right? The economic incentives are out of alignment with the actual users. Your content, anything you make, is not owned by you. And we know inherently that all centralized entities are subject to corruption, abuse, and censorship over a boundless time frame. Right? Eventually, any centralized system is going to corrupt itself. That's actually a natural process. Right? So I believe that data self-sovereignty is the future. And I think in the future, it's going to be very strange when you tell your grandkids about the current internet framework and you tell them, yeah, you know, in order to communicate with my friends, I would have to go to this one website, facebook.com, and then my friend would have to go on the website and subscribe and make an account, and we'd have to add each other, and then we'd create content that would be just in that one ecosystem. And by the way, we didn't even own that content. I think that will be a complete anathema to generations going forward. I think the whole model is actually reversed. Needs to reverse, and it will reverse itself. In the future, you will actually own all the data, and and that data will be able to flow in and out of different ecosystems very freely. So, if we agree that everything is information and the internet is the medium of human coordination, then this quote by George Orwell makes a lot of sense. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. If data is centralized, it can be censored, it can be controlled. And as we dive deeper and deeper as a society into the digital space, like i.e. the metaverse, the fundamental perception of reality can be controlled by entities that control the data. And I'm sure over the past few years, everyone here has seen stories come out about how the spread of information or misinformation can affect societies. And really, that's just like the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about having these highly centralized points of data distribution. So let's look at some of the different players in this ecosystem, and we'll get a flavor for the different approaches to decentralizing data, and how we're applying things like crypto economics, cryptography, incentivization systems, and different ideologies around decentralizing of data. So I think, we'd be remiss if we didn't start with IPFS. And I'm sure everyone here probably is very familiar with how IPFS works. IPFS is decentralized storage and delivery network. If anyone here has used NFT, which I'm assuming most of you guys have, you've probably interacted with the IPFS network. So the difference, the best analogy that I can give for IPFS is as opposed to the decentralized file system, file delivery systems, which require you to go to this one centralized source. So, for example, if you wanted a picture of a cat, you'd have to grab that file from a data warehouse in California, for example, and then that would be delivered to your computer. The idea around IPFS is that if that specific content is available in the network from someone who's sitting right next to you, there's no reason that you can't just take that from them and they can't share that from you. They can't share that with you. And that's why it's kind of picked up this name of Interplanetary File System. Because if you're living on Mars, you don't want to go all the way back to Earth to this one warehouse in California to get the picture of your cat. Rather, you'd want to get it from someone who's sitting right next to you in your giant bubble on the surface of Mars, right? So I think, so IPFS really, it was a great foundation for showing us how we can have a modern, scalable, peer-to-peer file distribution system. So let's talk about Filecoin now. Filecoin has taken the concepts behind IPFS and wraps it in some really interesting crypto incentivization mechanisms. So Filecoin uses the FIL token to pay for storage. And essentially your clients, people who want their data stored, are negotiating deals with miners who have the storage infrastructure. And these deals are negotiated on a one-on-one basis, and which is mediated by the blockchain itself. And so the blockchain itself holds the miners accountable, proving that they have hold of the data using zero knowledge proofs. And if they can't prove that, they're penalized. So, and also, if your data, let's say your data is really, really important and you want a miner to store that data, what you can also request from them is collateral. So the way that works is if the data is really important, that miner might have to put up a bond, which eventually gets returned. It might cost the miner to participate in that deal, but they'll get it back in the end, essentially. And just to give you some background on Filecoin, I'd say Filecoin is the market leader when it comes to decentralized storage. They have the most funding. They have the most infrastructure currently built out. I have it on the slide right here, has the equivalent cumulative storage capacity as Google Cloud 2018. So that's pretty impressive. It's also extremely cheap to use. It's significantly cheaper than using Google Cloud, for example. I got a chance to speak with them during South by Southwest. Really cool team. They're developing an EVM-compatible blockchain on Filecoin right now, too. And what they're hoping to do is to have the ability to have programmable storage. And they want that really close coupling. I think that's why they're trying to create their own blockchain as well. Let's move on to Ceramic. So Ceramic is a permissionless dynamic information management protocol for the open web. That's a mouthful, but essentially what they want to do is they want users to ditch the traditional database or server model, and they want people to build applications on trusted, or I guess trustless, this is the right crowd. I can use the word trustless, right? Trustless smart documents. So these smart documents, can turn static files into dynamic objects that have permalinks, versioning, and programmable logic that's not possible in a pure database. The key around smart documents is to have this trustless state management system for the content that is completely decentralized and can be customized. So I think this is going to be really important in the business space. I can imagine insurance policies, the future, are going to have like predefined tiles. Tiles are what they describe as schemas that can be published. So, for example, possible in the future you'll see the insurance industry, for example, might have a standardized schema for insuring, cars, for example, right? And that schema that tile can be can be on the ceramic network and accessible to anyone who wants it. So I think that's really, really interesting kind of development that's going on here. And another thing about ceramic is that ceramic is blockchain and storage agnostic. So you can choose how you want to anchor and persist your ceramic documents. They have built-in identity, so each document is tied to this identity. So if you have a company, that company can have an identity, and then by interacting with that identity, you can get access to all the published tiles from that company or all the published smart documents from that company. So I think that they're really interesting. They're also launching public network pretty soon. They haven't really announced their incentive mechanism there, but right now anyone can use ceramic. But you're going to have to worry about how you're going to anchor and achieve that persistence right now. So let's talk about Arweave. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this project. And it has a very different approach from some of the other ones that we just mentioned. And Arweave is really trying to introduce or really make mainstream the concept of the permaweb, which is any content that you publish to the permaweb persists to the end of time, which is a really radical idea, right? So it's based on what they call a block weave, which they have a proof of work mechanism built into it. But along with the proof of work mechanism, they incentivize miners to replicate data by rewarding them for being able to retrieve data that is considered rare in the network, right? So if there's a file that not many people are replicating, and you're replicating that, and there's a block reward for that, you can make quite a bit of money from being the one who replicates that data. I think the really interesting part of Arweave is the economic incentivization. It has a much higher initial cost to store data due to the permanence. So I think I have here, it's $7.96 per gigabyte to store your data forever, theoretically, on Arweave, versus essentially 2 cents per month by S3. Right? So you're paying that big cost up front. And what they're betting on here, and this is super interesting, they're betting on the 30% reduction in storage cost per year. So over the past 50 years, storage has come down about 50% per year, or 30% per year. And what they do is they take a huge part of that fee and they put it into an endowment pool. And that endowment pool is used to subsidize if the nodes are somehow unprofitable. And currently, based on their projections, they have enough money in the endowment pool, which they haven't had to touch, by the way. But they have enough money in the endowment pool to keep the Arweave network going for the next 200 years, which is just absolutely astounding to me. It's the closest that we're going to get that I think some methodology close to this is going to be the closest that we're going to get to permanence in the digital space. Because 98% of all data on the internet is actually deleted every year. Most of the data that you have on the internet just gets thrown out. There really isn't permanence around it. It's actually a misnomer when we say everything you do on the internet always stays. It's really because everything we do on the internet is based around a few centralized platforms that it stays. But in general, most of the stuff that happens on the internet is deleted. So there are a few other entities in the decentralized data space. Storage, Safe Network, SIA, Textile. These are minor players. I don't know how competitive those first three are going to be going forward, to be completely honest. I think that what's happening right now is that there's a lot of consolidation around a handful of players. The three that I mentioned are probably some of the major players there. There might be room for one or two more. I'm just not sure who it's going to be. But I think the crypto incentive layer has been kind of figured out. I think now it's just a question of what applications can be built on top of this stuff. And I want to emphasize that there's really no single right answer. If you talk to the Filecoin team, they think that Arrowweave is heresy, and then if you talk to the Arrowweave team, they think that the Filecoin team are Luddites. The same politics that we kind of have in the blockchain space is also going to be reflected in the decentralized storage space. There's just different ideologies and different approaches that different teams are taking. I think that leads, and I don't think there's any single right answer. I think we're honestly just too early now to be able to place a bet and say what is decentralized storage going to look like in 10 years from now. Let's talk about challenges and concerns. Is it possible that we're trading the tyranny of one master, which is Google Cloud or Amazon, the tyranny of many masters? Could data networks be subject to the same politics that the blockchain vertical is subject to? I think I just alluded to that. I think that's definitely a possibility. If I don't know if anyone's a fan of Dune, but they always say he who controls the spice controls the universe. Well, he who controls the data controls the universe. Or they're going to be decentralized data cartels. They're acting in their own interests. And what are the politics of that how is that going to play out over the coming decades? So I think there's a human factor here that really just cannot be overlooked. Also, data privacy is a major issue. One, because it's not inherent in most of these platforms that I mentioned. I think SIA might have data privacy inherently, I think. But most of these do not account for data privacy. That is up to the individual right now. And most people are managing their data privacy via centralized means, and so if you have a large company, they probably have a centralized key management solution. And I had done some work previously to try and kind of innovate on this. And every kind of Fortune 500 told me, what the hell are you talking about? I don't understand decentralization. So maybe a little bit early to the conversation there. Another factor here is that a lot of the data privacy and I relationship to the actual data itself is based on a blockchain identifier. And that is a really critical point of failure. Why? Because it's important for us to recognize that most blockchain addresses are compromised. They're compromised in the sense that they're linked to an individual. They're linked to a John Smith, an Ali Aga. Why is that? Because at some point, most people touch an exchange. They touch a source that requires them to identify themselves. And once that information is out there, it's actually very widely published between these companies and between government regulators. That essentially compromises the identity of the address, which then controls the data. So I think that's a concern. Performance, Amazon and Google Cloud, they're not getting money for just nothing. They're obviously they have great performance. They have redundancy built in. They have like fault tolerant systems. So there's a lot of sophisticated stuff going on there that I think that decentralized data space really needs time to catch up on. So that's all. Thank you so much for giving me some time to talk. I hope you were able to get something from that. I'd like to just open it up to the rest of the group here, and know what you guys think. What do you guys think of decentralized storage? Do you have any comments on anything that I've spoken about?
This is awesome. Thanks for doing this, Ali. I'm Jeff, and my question is about the Amazon Web Servers and IPFS. And I was curious about because I heard somebody said that they actually, IPFS uses Amazon Web Servers, which I assume that they should, or that they can, or that they might have to. But I guess number one, is that true? And then number two, like, does it mean that they're not really as decentralized as we thought?
Jeff, that's a great observation. So I think there's a lot of excuse my French, but there's a lot of circle jerking going on about decentralization. Because why do I say that? Because the backbone of a lot of Web3 providers are based on these cloud service providers, right? Infura, I believe, is using Amazon, for example, right? As far as IPFS goes, IPFS isn't a centralized entity, but it's up to individuals how they want to host their IPFS nodes. And I know from experience, most of those nodes are hosted in the cloud. So, it's, that's definitely a point of vulnerability. And it comes down to the core issue, which is people don't want to have their own infrastructure. We do not want to go back to the old days where we have this server in our closet, right? And we're just scared we're going to burn down the house or something like that. Perhaps what we need to do to get around this is to create an easier on-ramp for people to host IPFS nodes through a decentralized, incentivized provider similar to Filecoin, right? And maybe that's a great product that somebody needs to invent. Jeff, I might take that from you.
Do it, please do it. Because I have been wanting to get into Filecoin, but I just haven't been able to I haven't really honestly dived in enough to try to figure it out. But I assume you gotta learn a lot of things and get some of the right hardware and all that. But be interesting to see if there was, a way to make it easier. And because I would like to just store, like, let's say all my NFTs, and kind of be self-sovereign in that respect, and be like my own IPFS server, maybe store some other people's stuff, but also just make sure that my stuff's secure and not necessarily depend on the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I was working as head of product for an NFT platform, and we were doing everything through Pinata. If anyone's ever heard of Pinata, um, and one of the things that we kind of realized was, what if Pinata goes down? Every time Pinata goes down, we're kind of stuck. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely a concern.
Absolutely. And don't want to hog the stage, so I'll leave it up for other questions. But I just wanted to mention during South by, I learned about a platform called, or it's a blockchain called Illuvio. And it's from the Blockchain Creative Labs, which was like one of the major sponsors for South by. And the Fox Entertainment Group funds them. So it's like basically storing media files on chain. So like Dolly Parton's live stream, I guess there's only like one copy of that video file, and it's, I guess, token gated access to it. But it's really interesting how, like, the directions that the big media companies are going with blockchain. So they take like the whole video file and break it up into 2-second chunks or blocks, and I guess those are stored on chain somehow, and they, like, all the computer scientists in the world said that like this couldn't be done, but somehow they did it. Whether or not it's solving the trilemma, the blockchain trilemma in the most in the best way possible, I don't know. But it is interesting to learn about it, and to see like where the big companies are going with all that. So I just thought I would mention it.
Awesome presentation. Ollie, thanks. I like the George Orwell quote: "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." That's pretty cool. A little bit, I guess, scary considering the stuff he wrote. But I was just curious about the statement about all centralized systems lead to kind of a bad outcome. And wanted to see if you had anything else to comment on that. I guess we can think about Facebook and kind of the bad place that is, or governments. And anyway, do you think that blockchain will solve some of those problems, or will it just kind of repeat them eventually?
That is a fantastic question. So first, like, why do I think that all centralized systems eventually lead to some form of tyranny or misuse? It's because centralized systems oftentimes have limited ability to distribute power. And that could be economic power, it can be voting power. Those levers tend to be manipulated at some point because it's in incentive. It's in the natural incentive of the participants to try and manipulate those levers for their own benefit, right? We have lobbyists in the government today, right? The question of, can that same thing happen in the blockchain space, in a decentralized space, in an autonomous space? I think it can. I think there'll be evil DAOs out there. There'll be, mega corporation DAOs that are purely profit seeking, and are, the decentralized component of Web3 cannot overcome the human condition. It can simply act as a mechanism to further help manage it. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic. I think there's a lot of good tools for transparency and accountability. Just ability to have like an on-chain bank account that everyone can see where you're spending money and on-chain voting. Um, but there's still some extra challenges, like decision making. We're trying to figure out in ATX DAO how to reward people and come to conclusions. You don't have like a single person making decisions, and that can be a challenge. But it's also really scalable and removes a lot of the bottlenecks or failure points that centralized organizations have. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting comment. Thanks.
If there's not any more questions, I would ask one about Arweave. I also heard that Arweave is using IPF or yes, using IPFS. Is that not true? Or do you
Uh,
know?
Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head if Arweave is using IPFS. That's a really good question. Let me.
Yeah. I heard something that's like Arweave is built on top of IPFS. Is what somebody said. So I don't know if that's true. I mean, there's lots of misinformation out there. So
My interpretation was that they were not using IPFS. Um,
okay,
and the reason I say that is because someone had mentioned to me that they don't have the same content addressing as you'd have in IPFS. So
interesting.
I don't think they are.
And then about the about Filecoin building their own blockchain. Do you know more about that? Can you speak? Because that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that.
Yes. So I think what the Filecoin ecosystem saw with Arweave was they had Arweave had this very tight coupling with programmable data, right? Because it is in a sense a blockchain itself. Um, and and also Arweave obviously is built on the idea of the permaweb, right? So I think they saw that and they said, okay, how can we make that redundant? How can we essentially adopt all those same features? And if you think about it, you could have if you had a blockchain that was tightly coupled with the Filecoin ecosystem, you could just create a smart contract that you pre-funded that continuously renewed the storage deals forever. Or you could
Oh,
build
that's
in,
smart. I love that.
yeah, you could build in a treasury mechanism in there, right? And then before you know it, you have a lot of the feature set that Arweave has. So I think that's the motivation there. But that's a little bit inside baseball.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the statement that Filecoin has the equivalent cumulative storage for Google as Google Cloud in 2018. Does that mean that Filecoin has like the ability to scale up to that size, or they actually have that many files? Because Google has like petabytes of information.
That is the capacity that they currently have. They could store the same equivalent amount of data as Google Cloud in 2018. But I think a vast majority of that storage is not utilized.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, some of these new storage systems are just incredibly large.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost at the point now that I don't even think yeah, I think we've solved the data storage problem. We're going to solve the performance problem. The the next issue I think that needs to be solved, if you're looking ahead, maybe a decade ahead, is how do you persist this information in a world where the internet is not as it is today. You know, so you know, I'm so sorry. What is that? What is that network called of decentralized Wi-Fi hotspots? Does anyone know off the top of their head?
Are you talking about
Oh,
helium?
that's William.
Helium, right? Exactly. Like, can there be helium integration with this file storage systems? Because I think you need to go that far to have that tight integration with something like helium to really make this all persistent. You need a completely autonomous system that can distribute information and data that doesn't purely rely on the pipes under the ocean.
Mm-hmm. The decentralized network.
Yeah, a truly decentralized network that almost sits adjacent to the open internet that we all use that relies on the pipes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it sounds expensive.
Yeah, but with the proper incentivization mechanism like helium has, maybe it's not too bad. I don't know.
Yeah, with the switch to next generation communication, I think their bandwidth increased significantly. LTV, is that what it's called? So yeah, it's starting to look a lot more interesting. I was surprised by some of the stats you gave that the cost was approaching cloud storage. Your first statement that said our grandkids are going to look back and be surprised that we stored all our data in a centralized database. I guess previous to your presentation, I was a little bit skeptical of that because there are certain cost advantages of having an entity store your data that would be difficult on blockchain or distributed technologies. But it sounds like there's being a lot of advancements made so that the performance and cost are quickly becoming more reasonable so that you could have all the data from Facebook or some videos that are stored in a decentralized way. Is that your observation?
Yeah, I think the cost of storage is collapsing as we speak. I think you are paying a huge premium when you say that you're storing 1 GB of data for $12 on ROE, for example. Why? Because every year the cost of storage is decreasing 30%, but the capacity is increasing 30% per unit, right? So you're not prepaying for 50 years. You're prepaying for hundreds of years. You're actually theoretically, if the statistic holds, you're prepaying forever. The only other analogy that I can kind of think of at the top of my head is the same thing they say about life extension, right? If you're born at a certain date and the science is so good that they're adding X amount of years to human beings' lives, essentially, theoretically, you'd live forever, right? I know that's a little bit out there, but you get what I'm saying in terms of the analogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. That's awesome.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I really appreciate all the comments so far. Really interesting stuff.
Are you going to make this presentation available?
Yeah.
Yes, I've been recording it, so I'm assuming we'll upload it to YouTube shortly after.
I mean the slides. This is a really good deck.
Got you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. If you'd like the slides, I don't mind sending them over to you all. I'll just send them over to you after this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Really well done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really loved it. And sorry I missed the first part. I was unaware that y'all do these. Are there announcements for every once in a while about presentations like this?
Yeah, we're actually restarting these lunch and learns. So we're going to have it on a weekly basis, and usually on Thursdays. And we're going to start having more and more presentations, educational presentations throughout the rest of the week, either during the day or after normal work hours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I love it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, watch our website and then the events in Discord also. We'll try to keep those up to date.
All right, sounds good. I guess unless anybody has anything to add, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.